Basil, this is quite a big revelation that Grant King, the chair of the Climate Change Authority, who Chris Bowen has just axed a year before his term was up with Matt Kean, and it turns out that their views weren't quite aligned, that Grant King had advocated for nuclear. He called it, in his words, important, and even said the government's ban on it should be overturned. What do you think?
Fancy getting somebody who is not politically aligned in an important position like this, and then that person not necessarily agreeing with the ideology or thoughts of the government of the day, and then their contract suddenly ending a year earlier. I love that term he used, energy agnostic. I would have thought that's exactly what you want in somebody in that sort of position. Somebody who doesn't have a predisposed view towards one form or another, one form of energy and any of the climate debate, and can assess it as it was. That's what we had in Chairman King, but now he's gone. And I think that departure is revealing less about him and more about the government, who have been there as he's gone a year early.
Joe, your colleague Dennis Shanahan wrote about this, and it seems that Grant King did have quite a sensible position that nuclear energy should be part of the mix, that he's energy agnostic, as Basil just spoke about. But do you think, Joe, that Bowen's energy response is looking increasingly irrational, particularly his just outright opposition to nuclear, when he can't put a reason on the table apart from the cost of it?
Sherry, I think it's pretty hard to tell at this stage how the nuclear debate will unfold. This will be a very long debate. I think Peter Dutton has engaged, though, in crash through or crash politics. This is very big, bold, audacious, brash. I think there are political risks for the coalition in putting out this plan. I think the most significant risk is that they've put out a plan they'll never be able to legislate or get through a hostile Senate if they do win government. There's no bipartisan support. There is that prohibition which Grant King mentioned. Perhaps Peter Dutton thinks that because his plan is so big and bold that if he does win majority government, he can shame Labor into accepting his electoral mandate. But I don't think there's any guarantee of that. Remember that Labor went to the election in 2000 promising to roll back the GST. So I think it is high stakes. But the other point is this doesn't happen for a long time. I don't think nuclear is going to turn many votes at the next election. People are going to be more concerned about what's happening now to bring down power prices. And I think that's where the coalition needs to fill in the gaps.
But isn't that what Peter Dutton's doing here? He's trying to link energy to the cost of living. He's trying to say that Labor's plan on renewable energy is what's pushing up power prices. Basil, don't you get the sense that that is part of Dutton's strategy when he wants to keep speaking about nuclear, because he is linking those two issues, energy and cost of living?
No doubt about that whatsoever. But also, even more simplistic than that, he is providing an absolute contrast between his leadership style and the leadership style of the Prime Minister. One of conviction, one of you know what you get if you vote for me. You're not certain what you're going to get if you continue to support the Prime Minister. And so I think what he's trying to do, in addition to that point, Sherry, is create an impression with people. If the big issues come up, if inflation continues to rise, if interest rates continue to go up, which one of the two of us is likely to take decisive action on whatever the topic of the day is? And that's, I think, what he's really able to, or has been able to so far, provide that distinction between his leadership style and the Prime Minister's leadership style.
And it does look like cost of living is going to continue to be a major issue for the rest of this year. I mean, the inflation data that we've seen just this week, Joe, inflation has risen to 4%. Where now you've got economists talking about 1 or potentially even 2 rate rises this year. I mean, it wasn't so long ago. It was the start of this year. Labor was anticipating there'd be an interest rate cut at the end of this year. So do you think the political debate, Joe Kelly, is going to start to centre on whether it's the Labor budget that's doing this? And because this is where Peter Dutton tried to take it in question time today.
Core inflation, the Reserve Bank's preferred measure, is at 4.4%, the highest level this year. Prime Minister, why do Australians have to live in fear of yet another rate rise under this hopeless government?
The government has to do its bit. And we've got a government here who has been reckless in 3 failed budgets. It hasn't done what needed to be done. We've got 16% growth in spending in the next 2 years in this budget, driving the budget off a cliff. It's a big spending budget.
Sorry about that, Joe Kelly. So clearly that is the coalition's argument. They're saying that it's the budget that is to blame for the rise in inflation. Do you think that has credibility?
Well, it's not just me who thinks that argument has credibility, Sherry. Last week, the Reserve Bank Board released its statement. It contained a new and I think very revealing line saying that it was concerned about the final budget outcomes. So this is the federal and state government budget decisions contributing to expansionary settings which will make the Reserve Bank's jobs harder over time. So I think that there is, a number of people who are very concerned about this. Just recently, it was Warren Hogan sort of out on his own saying that he was predicting a rate hike in coming months, but he's now been joined by others. Financial markets are sort of about 50-50 that there'll be a rate hike. Now, if that happens, I think that is a political catastrophe for Labor. It will be used mercilessly by Peter Dutton and Angus Taylor to attack their budget as being inappropriate for the time. And I think there'll be a lot to those arguments. And this is where the election will be, I think, Sherry, this cost of living issue.
Absolutely. Now let's have a look at Julian Assange. It's been 24 hours since he's arrived in Australia. We covered it here last night. Already eyes are now on the US, and there's now calls from some of his supporters, some Assange activists, pressure that they're putting now on the US to pardon Assange. And this is a call that his own lawyer, Australian barrister Jennifer Robinson, reiterated today.
Of course, the word pardon has been discussed over the last number of years. It is something that I think press freedom groups are talking about already because of the precedent that was set, that it would be the right thing to do to give him a pardon, given the free speech implications of what just happened and the chilling effect of that prosecution. What we're interested in is not just a pardon for Julian, but in changing the law to make sure that no other journalist can be prosecuted in this way under the Espionage Act.
Basil, what do you think about this? I mean, as far as I'm concerned, he's a convicted criminal who put lives at risk. He's not a journalist. He didn't go through this carefully. It was a document dump. What do you reckon?
And he pled guilty. Let's not forget that. I mean, he is free and back in Australia today, and most people would say 14 years is long enough. We're pleased that this saga is over and pleased that an Australian is back on Australian soil after that ordeal. But much of that ordeal he put himself through by not facing the court or extradition, as were the requests upon him. He went and hid in the Ecuadorian embassy and then obviously did jail time in the UK. He pled guilty to one case of obtaining and disclosing national defence documents and secrets. He pled guilty. So why do you get a pardon if you are guilty?
No, well, exactly. Very good point. Joe, what do you think of the Albanese government's response to this? We've seen both the Prime Minister and Penny Wong refusing to comment on his actual crime. They just want to move past it and instead take credit for the fact he's back in Australia.
Look, Sherry, I was really struck between the contrast in sort of the political optics now, the comments from Anthony Albanese and the comments from Julia Gillard, which you played before. I think one of the key issues is what Julian Assange does next. I was reading that he said that he thought that there was a contradiction between the Espionage Act and the First Amendment, upholding free speech, freedom of the media and so on, which I don't think is a particularly good sign. I think the question is he going to return to form? And I think one of the risks is, given a sense of triumphalism from supporters and the rhetoric from the government, he may feel encouraged to do that. Now, I think the government really has to get the balance right here, and certainly they would respond very forcefully against the dumping of hundreds of thousands of top secret documents of an Australian flavour. So I think the government has to get the balance right in relation to this, and I don't think it has.
Yeah, it seems like Albanese
Well,
can never
what he should do,
quite get these
he's
things
loved.
right.
No,
Go ahead,
he's loved
Basil.
and loathed in almost equal measure. Lots of people despise what he did. Lots of people supported him. What he should do is go on the speaking circuit, put away WikiLeaks forever, and go and earn some very substantial money and enjoy his life after 14 years of really self-imposed exile and incarceration. He should leave that life behind him, move forward with his life, and let's be done with it.
Yeah, if only that was the case. In fact, I think we're going to see more of him than ever. And I had Jeffrey Robertson on the show last night, and he says that Julian Assange is looking at an autobiography. So there's going to be a lot of Assange to come, unfortunately. Basil Zempilas, Joe Kelly, thank you both for your time.